Sorry guys, Reed knocked over my phone. Trying to adjust. So, after 32 weeks, my doctor decided to do weekly ultrasounds. So I had a weekly ultrasound every week, up until he was born. At 34 weeks, he barely made it to like 25 weeks along. And oh my gosh, no, don't get in the video. He has my underwear wrapped around his head. Go play! Goodness. His legs were measuring barely at 25 weeks gestational. He was growing, but just not growing where he should have been. Which means that there was a sign that there was either no room for him to grow or it was something with his body. So then at 38 weeks, we made it. We kept going, with the weekly ultrasounds. We did not have like any alertness, before then. The doctor wasn't super concerned because his heart, his brain, his lungs, and everything were super, super healthy. The placenta was healthy. Everything was healthy. He was getting what he needed. It was just his body that wasn't just growing. And so, at 38 weeks, I had an ultrasound done. And as soon as my doctor put the monitor on my belly to look at Reed, it was on there non less than maybe a minute, and she looks over at the nurse and she says, "I want you to call the high risk doctor." So my first initial was like, I was just scared. You don't want to hear, go in with full intentions that your baby is healthy and everything, and then have a doctor immediately say, "I need the high risk doctor." So I got worried. The two high risk doctors came in and were measuring his organs and everything. At this point, his organs stopped growing. So, his heartbeat was still steady. His lungs, like you could see his lungs working. He had movement. He was very much alive, but his organs stopped growing. Usually that is normal. That is normal for 38 weeks to 40 weeks because they're usually almost completely developed. They just gain weight. He was measuring around 4 pounds. But his organs, they didn't grow in size since 36 weeks. So that was 2 weeks of his organs not growing. They weren't concerned at the 37-week ultrasound because my ultrasound at 36 weeks was like a Thursday, and then my ultrasound for my 37 weeks was planned for a Tuesday, so it was only like a 5-day difference. And so then the high risk doctor said that Reed had fetal growth restriction, which my OB did not know much about. So he said that I should have been induced a lot sooner, because fetal growth restriction leads to suffocation in the womb, which it makes not a lot of sense because they don't really breathe air in the womb. They just breathe in like the amniotic fluid, but it means that his face was going to be submerged around his own body and the wall of my uterus, or the placenta could have suffocated him. There wasn't any room for him to grow or stretch or anything, so he was too constricted, which means that his chest was going to eventually stop growing, which means that it would have constricted his organs and it would cause them to shut down, which would have led to him being a stillborn. So then that was an immediate choice to induce me. At that point, I could not get induced that night. So I went the next day to be induced. I went in at 7 o'clock at night to be induced. Before I went to the hospital, though, I stopped at Waffle House and I ate a whole bunch of food, because I've learned, which you can learn right now if you don't have a baby, once you get to the hospital and get your IVs on you and everything, you can't eat anything except for their Jell-O, ice cubes, popsicles, and chicken broth. That's all you can eat until after the baby's born. You don't know how long your labor is going to be. What I've been told, and I took a lot of classes, like pregnancy classes, parenting classes, labor classes. Usually I talked to other moms there that were already moms, and they, told me that their first labor was longer than, 12 hours. Usually your first time labor is 12 to 48 hours, somewhere around then. My mom was in labor with me for 56 hours. That was crazy. So that's what I mentally prepared myself for, on top of already having this news of what's going on with Reed. So I was super stressed out, and I was preparing for the absolute worst to happen, painful contractions, I've heard that because Pitocin starts labor and makes your labor a lot more intense and painful. I'll make sure to give you guys, he doesn't want to get into it. I'll make sure to give you guys dictionary terms of what everything is. Pitocin is what helps start your labor. Ooh, out of focus. It's what helps, it induces you. It's a medicine that goes into your IV. So I was just prepared for the absolute worst, and the most painful experience, but beautiful experience in my life. So I made sure I ate good, so I wouldn't be starving, because I figured I was going to be in labor for ever. And so I went to the hospital, I got my IVs in, I got changed, I got all set up into my room, and my friends and my family came and visited me that night, and around 10 o'clock, I did not start Pitocin yet. I had a plan to stay the night in the hospital, and I was going to take medicine to help ripen my cervix, which means it softens my cervix to help get ready for the baby to be born, and to start my dilation. Or start the Pitocin to help get me dilated and starting my labor. When I went into the hospital, I was at a 0. At my 36-week appointment, I was at a 1.5, and then I went back down to a 0, which can happen. So that night, I started my Cytotec, which was the medicine I was telling you about that helps ripen the cervix and soften it and everything. Sorry guys if you're watching and you're getting grossed out, and this is TMI, but one day you guys are going to have babies. You're gonna experience someone having babies. Guys, you're gonna have wives someday, or you might have a girlfriend that has a baby, or whatever you choose to do, however you have a baby, adopt, whatever. You should just know how a baby's born. It's beautiful, but it's kind of gross at the same time. So at this point, they gave me the Cytotec, and which was kind of like a little balloon, or not a balloon. I was going to do a balloon. There's a balloon that helps expand your cervix too, but I didn't have the balloon yet. I just had the medicine, which did help a little bit. It helped my cervix expand, pretty good, to where it was showing signs of labor. So they put a balloon in me to help speed that along a little bit. It was only in me for a total of 30 minutes, because they took it out right after, or at 10 o'clock. At 10 o'clock, I was still visiting with friends and family. They were still at the hospital with me. I was actually doing schoolwork on my laptop, or on my Chromebook at the hospital. I had a paper due or something. I was just working on it, and so around 10 o'clock, my nurse came in. She was like, "Hey, are you feeling okay?" And I was like, "Yeah, I feel fine." She was like, "Well, you're having consistent contractions." I was having contractions that were exactly 11 minutes apart, which is very far apart. Usually, active labor is when you're dilated to a 4 and your contractions are at least 5 minutes apart. Mine were 11 minutes apart, but they were strong and they were consistent. They were always 11 minutes apart. And so they checked me, and I was at a 2. So from 7 o'clock to 10 o'clock, I went from a 0 to a 2 with the help of the cytotech. And so she was like, are you in pain? Are you in discomfort? If you need the epidural, before 8 a.m., then you can let me know. And so I was like, I'm fine. And what I felt was just crampy. Like, I just felt cramps in my back. But I had been feeling that for like 2 weeks now. And so I was used to it. And she was like, oh, okay, well, if you need any, pain reliever, anything to help, just let me know, hit the nurse button. I was like, okay, I'll be fine. Around 11:30, I went to sleep. And of course, I kept getting woken up in the middle of the night. I got woke up around 2 and then 4 and 7 because they always wanted to check me. But I didn't really, I was still having consistent contractions throughout the night, but I was able to sleep through them because they weren't as bad as I thought at that point. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. For early contractions, they eventually went to 9 minutes apart, but it just felt like period cramps to me. And so around 7 a.m. they checked me again, and I was at a 3. So I went back to sleep for a little bit just for like an hour, because I wasn't planning on starting my Pitocin until 8:30, and the anesthesiologist was going to come with my epidural by 9:30. It was just kind of all planned out easily. I don't know. It was just easily planned. So, I woke up around 8 o'clock, to people. There was a lady behind me and a lady in front of me in another room that both were giving birth without an epidural, and they were screaming bloody murder, and it woke me up. And I was like, I'm for sure getting this epidural. Because I did not want to experience what I heard them experiencing. Around 8:30, I didn't start the Pitocin yet because they checked me and I was at a 4, which means that I started active labor, which means that I went into labor on my own without the inducement. So I went in there to be induced, but I went into labor there. So I was at a 4, and my contractions were 8 minutes apart. And they were getting a little bit more intense. By 9 o'clock, they were at a point where I felt like I was going to throw up. What are you doing? Yeah. Thank you. Sorry, Reed has a runny nose. Sorry. Go play! So my contractions around 9 o'clock were getting a little bit more intense. So I just wanted to experience what it felt like. So the anesthesiologist was already planning to come in there by 9:30 to give me the epidural. So I experienced 30 minutes of contractions, which is a lot less than what people normally do. So by 9 o'clock, I was at a 4. And I was in active labor. The anesthesiologist came in to do my epidural at 9:30. Well, he got there at like 9:45 because he was running a little bit late. 9:45, 10 o'clock. He came in there and started the epidural. Honestly, in my opinion, the epidural was not bad at all. It just felt like a cold shot in my back. I've had previously 2 spinal taps, which a spinal tap is a thicker needle, and it went deep into my back a lot deeper than what the epidural does. And it wasn't numbing at all. Like, after the epidural is in there, it starts numbing. So it's kind of like it's a faster relief than what a spinal tap was. So after I got my spinal tap, my epidural, I heard people start coming to the room, and I heard them up against the door, and my best friend showed up, and she heard through the door, Ira, stop moving, and I wasn't moving because it was painful. I was moving because it tickled the heck out of my back. It hurt. it hurts so bad, and so, or not hurt, like the tickling, like it, you know, if you're tickled, you don't want to be tickled, it hurt. So after that, I had to sit up or lay down in a certain position. I don't remember quite much. Around 12 o'clock, my nurse came back into the room to check me, and she had acrylic nails. She was a previous Nixa cheerleader, and I went to Nixa and I cheered there, and so I got to get along with her very well. And she had these really cute acrylic nails on, which I'm not sure if you're supposed to have when you're a nurse. I don't know. But she was checking me, and she was like, oh, you're at a 6. And so that's, in my mind, this was around 12 o'clock. That's 4 more centimeters. That's all I need to do before I'm ready to have Reed. Because you have to get to 10 centimeters before you push. So I was at a 4, and now she was I was at a 6, and now she was checking me. She goes, oh, she was like, your water's bulging. And I was like, what does that mean? And then all of a sudden you heard a big pop. And my water broke. She broke my water on accident with her nails, which I was super relieved, because if she didn't, they were going to have to take the fish hook and break my water on its own. So that was like, so I already skipped the Pitocin by the time I got to the hospital, because I went into labor on my own, and I skipped the fish hook. So everything was going along super fast and super easy for me, and I had my epidural, everything was fine. And then I had to sit in a certain position because Reed kind of turned after my water broke. So I had to sit in between a yoga ball, or I had to have a yoga ball in between my legs, and I had to sit sideways, and it was just really awkward and uncomfortable. And so that's what I had to do for like a whole hour. And then I finally was able to sit back up and face everyone and, you know, get happy, you know, talk to everyone, get social. Everyone kind of came back from lunch at that point, and they were all sitting there talking to me. Someone said something extremely funny as I was drinking out of a cup. I was drinking some water. Someone said something so funny that I started choking on my water, and I was coughing a lot. So I was coughing, and then all of a sudden I felt immediate pressure. Immediate pressure between my legs. So at that point, I just called the nurse in there because I felt weird, because I was sitting straight up and my legs were like kind of straight down too. Like I was literally sitting like this. And so I called the nurse and I was like, I know this is probably not anything because you just checked me and I was at a 6. But I just kind of feel weird down there. And so she laid me down and she was like, oh my gosh. She was like, I see his hair. She was like, don't move. She was like, don't do anything, don't push. She was like, we have to do your 3 practice pushes. So I did 2. And then she picked up the phone, she called the doctor. She was like, you need to come in here. I see this baby's head, he's about to be born. And so I didn't even get to have a chance to tell everyone that it's time to have the baby, because last time everyone knew, like I was checked up on, we were at 6. And so I looked at her, I was like, what happened to 7, 8, 9, 10? Like, getting prepared for that. And Sam came and grabbed Reed. So I was like not prepared to already like Reed to be halfway out. And so the doctors came in there, I got all ready, and they just said, push. And I was like, okay. And I pushed, I sat up, and I wasn't screaming. It wasn't hard. It was just quiet and peaceful. The nurse asked me what I wanted to eat. She already started my food order, which I was so happy about. Or like at that point, I was like, yes, food, please. And so I told her, I was like, I wanted chicken strips, I wanted mashed potatoes and brown gravy, I wanted peanut butter and jelly, I wanted some chocolate cake. Like, I just wanted everything. Everything that I could possibly have. This is all about you! So then I kept pushing. I did, how many push? I pushed for 15 minutes. And then my last push, I just heard Sam say, just push a little bit harder, he's almost out. And then I pushed, and I just saw him come out. And I just heard a little baby cry. And honestly, it was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my life. It was so amazing. Go get Dad. Go get Dad. Thinking about it now, I tear up all the time because just a baby you love so much that you're giving birth to, that you grew inside your stomach, and all of the stress that I had about him growing and, you know, his fetal growth restriction and everything, that all went over my head. And when I heard the first cry and he came to my chest, it was like an unbelievable experience. It was, I can't even, like, no one, I can't compare the experience. You know, you hear his cry, you hear his heartbeat, but then as soon as he comes to your chest, he just stops. And he knows that I was his mom. And everything around me was just, like, silent. It was peaceful. And I said I could do that 10 more times. You know, I loved every second of it. And, you know, even though the pregnancy was kind of rough and rocky, it was all worth it. So, thank you guys so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed my story. There will be so much more stories that I could do, you know, so much more that we're going to come up with content for our channel. We haven't been releasing a lot of videos, just because, you know, life happens and it's hard to film every day or every other day. But we're trying to come up with new content. We're trying to figure out how to edit these videos so they're more appealing, so that more people will watch. You know, everything for you guys. So I appreciate your guys' time, and we will see you guys tomorrow.